Hello guys, welcome to the next video on Java programming tutorial for beginners. In the last video we have seen how to use try-catch block with our Java code. In this video we will see what is finally block in Java and how we can use it with try-catch block in Java. So first of all, what is a finally block? The finally block always executes when the try block exists. Okay, so generally you use finally block when you want to add a try catch block with your code. Okay, and the property of finally block is it always execute whether your exception occurs or it doesn't occur. It doesn't matter what the code does, it throws exception or it doesn't throw exception. This finally block is always executed. So using this finally block, you have always the chance to release your resources. Okay, so let me give you an example. In the last video we have seen that we can use a try catch block, something like this, and this is the code which throws an exception because any integer which is divided by 0 will give an infinity, and then Java will throw an exception for that. And which exception it throws? It throws arithmetic exception, right? Now to add a finally block to our try catch block, what we can do is we can just write finally and then in the curly braces you can close it. Okay, so this is how you add finally block to your try catch block. And the property of this is it's always executed. So for example, I can print something here, for example, finally called. Okay, and let's add this print message here, and here we can say catch called. Okay, and let's save the program and run the program. And in here you see here it gives you this finally called message, right? And when I just scroll little bit above, it prints catch. That means this code throws an exception, and then this line is printed, and then it prints the exception which have occurred. And then at the end, when the exception is thrown and caught by this catch block, at the end this finally will execute. Okay, and this makes sure that you can release all your resources, or this can be used to do the final work whatever you want to do after the exception, or even if the exception doesn't happen, then also you can use finally in most of the situations. Okay, so it's a good practice to use finally with your try catch block. Okay, and there is only one situation where this finally block will not be called, and this situation is when you call a system.exit method inside your try block. So for example, I do something like this: system.exit with some integer here, for example 1, and I will comment this code. And when I run the code, then what happens? See, nothing happens. Why? Because we have called system.exit and it exits from the program, and this is the only situation where this finally will not be called. In any other situation, if the exception is thrown, if the exception is not thrown, finally will be called. Okay, now to understand this situation in a better way, let's create a method. For example, public static void, or let's return integer here, and let's say return int. Okay, let's say this method only return integer. Okay, so and inside this I'm just going to copy and cut this code which I have in the main and paste it here. Okay, and in the last, what I want to do is I want to return some integer. So for example, I want to return the value of a, right? So I want to declare this a outside my try block. Okay, and for example, we don't divide this 100 by 0, so it's valid situation, and we want to return a, right? So in here I want to delete this and I will return a. Okay, and for example, it throws an exception and it goes here. I want to return a here also, and in here also I want to return a. Okay, so in finally block I want to return a. This situation we will see later, but for now I want to do something like this. And in here I just want to call my system out, so sys out, and in here I just want to call my return int method, okay, inside this. Okay, so let's run the program and let's see what happens. So I'm running the program and it returns 100, and 100 is printed here, and then finally block is called after the try block returns. So even if your function returns, this finally block will be called. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you return from try block. Generally you would think that you are returning from here, then after return no code will be executed. But for finally, it's an exception. Finally will be executed even if you are returning in the try block or even in the catch block also. So let's divide it by 100, or divide this by 0, not here, but for example do it here. A is equal to a divided by 0. Okay, so it will throw, right? So it will go here and then exception code will be called, and then let's see what happens. So save the program and run the program, and once again we can see catch is called, so it throws an exception, it goes here, and it first of all it calls this finally block which prints this message finally called, and then only we will be able to see this 100 which is returned by this return. So it doesn't matter if you return from the try block or catch block, finally will be called in that situation also. Now there is one more situation which can occur. For example, I want to return from the finally block also. So for example, right now I have assigned a is equal to 100, right? And in the finally block I can override my return value. For example, I can do something like this: a is equal to 1000 or 5000. Okay, and then I can return a. Now what will be returned from here? Will it return 100 or will it return 5000? Let's see what will happen. So let me do this after this here, and what I'm going to do here, I will save this program and I'm going to run it, and you can see that finally overrides your return value also. Okay, so ideally it should return 100 if you don't return from finally, right? So I don't want to return from finally. I will save it and it will return 100 like this. Okay, but when you return from finally and you want to change the value which you want to return in finally, then finally will override your earlier return value, for example 5000. So I will save this and run this and it will return 5000. Okay, so in this way you can use finally with your try catch block, and always remember it's a good practice to use finally with your try catch block. So always try to use it whenever you use try catch blocks. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please rate, comment and subscribe, and bye.